My name is Brittany. I go by Puddin. Long story short, I started hiking for my mental health in 2017. I moved to Virginia and I had found day hikes along the Appalachian Trail and really started taking a notion in my mental health. And I was going through a lot of depression, anxiety at the time. So I really found myself out there. At the time, I didn't do anything crazy or long distance. Between 2017 to 2022, I'd only experienced one backpacking trip, but I did branch out and do a lot of road trips, the cross country road trips. So throughout this journey, I was slowly branching out, slowly, little by little. Fast forward to 2021, I feel like I was going through a new season of life where my life kind of came crashing and burning. My elderly dog at the time kind of passed away, so I was dealing with a lot of grief. He was almost 17 years old, so anyone that has lost anything in their life, I feel like he had been through, like with me, through so many challenges of life and through so many seasons that when I lost him, I literally, like my mental health spiraled out of control. My 5-year relationship at the time just crashed and was burning. I said, screw the 9 to 5. I completely just quit it and walked away. And I was like, what am I going to do with my life? Where am I going? What am I going to do? So I just felt like from suffering from a mental level, I was like, I need to go take a walk. And I know how good the day hiking is done and treated me. And I was like, we're going to do the entire Appalachian Trail. And everyone's like, you are absolutely crazy. You've only experienced one backpacking trip and you're going to go out there and hike for 6 months. I was like, yeah, we're going to do it. So I jumped on and I started April 2022, April 5th to be exact. Went up to, started on the approach trail on the Appalachian Trail and I walked the Appalachian Trail. Then when I made it to Katahdin, I was like, I have been walking for 6 months. I've adapted this new lifestyle and I don't want it to end. So I was like, let's continue walking. So I extended the extra miles to reach the Canadian border. Then after that, I went back to visit my family in Alabama. And I started doing some research and I realized that the trail, you can actually connect to this ECT trail, which is a trail that goes from the Canadian up to the Key West, Florida. And I was like, well, I can't do the part in Canada, but I've already reached the border, but let's go and start connecting the pieces. So that's exactly what I did. So I connected the pieces on the Pinhoti Trail, a little bit of the Bit McKay. I did the Alabama Road Walk, and then I walked straight through the Florida Trail and the Florida Keys. And then I stopped at that point at Key West, Florida at 4,400 miles in 11 months. And I was like, we're still not done. What's next? So I went back to the Pinhoti Trail and decided to do the yo-yo, which is you walk it in one direction and then you walk it back in the other direction. So I added another 750 miles. And then I decided to go walk the CDT right after that, which is a 3,100 mile trail. It's called the Continental Divide Trail. So it goes from the Canadian border to Montana down to Mexico to New Mexico. So I just ended my hiking journey this past December at 8,500 miles in 20 months.
That's wild. I remember when I first saw your page, I saw that you had done all this and I started to research you to see if you'd want to come on. And yeah, it was all under, how many months did you say?
It was 20 months.
So just over, under 2 years. That's wild. And just to take a step back, like you really hadn't done these long hikes like this before, just day hikes, and you just kind of up and did this. Like what went from, how did you go from starting this? Like how much research did you have to do? How much gear did you have to buy? Like how did you set up to actually do the Appalachian Trail?
Oh, this is such a fun question because I was not prepared, or I had not done as much research as I probably should have. I had watched a lot of YouTube videos and then kind of thought I could be an expert watching YouTube. Because I feel like a lot of us, it's like, just watch YouTube, you can figure it out. I did watch a lot of YouTube stuff. I did buy a lot of gear that I ended up sending back. I didn't need it. Honestly, it was kind of useless. But I went with what I kind of knew would work through some research and high quality. And that kind of got me through most of the trail. Like the tent I used for the entire 4,400 miles and half of the CDT. So it's like I kind of used the same gear. I had no experience, but I feel like when I started to walk, I suffered so much with where I was at in my life and my season that what I found on trail, I don't know, they always say you go to take a walk to find yourself, but I quickly realized there was nothing to be found because I didn't even know who I was. And it was like, this is just a person that was conditioned with society that told me who I am. No wonder I was lost, or I felt lost, because that's not who I was. That's just what society told me I was for so long. So then when I started to walk and I started to see these things about myself and these triggers and just how beautiful life can be and how simple it is once we take it back, I feel like I chased that for so long, like I didn't want it to end. So kind of
Okay.
the
Yeah.
8,500 miles wasn't the intention.
I definitely want to dive into the health aspect of it and maybe what you learned along the way. But I from what I understand, when you do these giant through hikes, like you have your gear, and that's pretty much intended to get you some of the way, right? You are constantly iterating on this gear list as you get into towns and find stops and whatnot. So like were you returning this stuff every time you went to town? How did you iterate on this pack of yours? And I guess at what point were you pretty comfortable with the gear you were running with?
I think one of the biggest things people learn when you start a through hike is you can actually live a lot simpler than you think. So I know when I first started, I needed an extra cup for my hot chocolate. I needed that extra spoon for this. I quickly realized, no, you don't. That adds weight and you don't really need that extra necessity. So when I would go into town, I would sometimes like mail myself stuff back. If it was kind of valuable, maybe I could use it later on, I would mail it back. Otherwise, sometimes when you get into these high trafficked hiker places, they have little boxes. They call them hiker boxes, and you can just throw your unwanted stuff in them, especially at the beginning of the AT, because so many people are ditching so much stuff, or like they didn't need these extra shorts or extra cups or all this extra stuff that you thought you needed. You can just throw them in that box, and then if someone does need them, it's their lucky day.
Oh, that's cool. I've heard of trail ferries where people will kind of station along the trail to give you snacks and stuff like that. But I have not heard of the hiker box. It's like a lost and found for the woods, or you know, take a penny, give a penny.
Oh, totally. And I've seen some people completely resupply on some hiker boxes, like extra food in there, or an extra like water filter or shoes. Like someone maybe quit and like threw all their gear in there. I've seen people come out with backpacks.
Total rage quit into the hiker box.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, uh, what I've found in like my nature experiences is like, I don't know, whenever I'm going through stuff, getting back to nature seems to always reset it. Getting somewhere where you don't have signal and just being forced to forget the world for a few hours, few days, whatever you can spare. It's just like so grounding to clear your head and get off the phone, get off social media and whatnot. Um, and yeah, so I don't know where you want to go in with this, but and you can go as deep or as shallow as you want with it, but what were you kind of learning along the way mentally as you progressed through these 8,500 miles?
Oh, this is a really good question. The biggest thing I learned was my worthiness and strength. I'm not worthy by the clothes that's on my back or by the things that society has told me or by the car that I'm driving, because it's literally just the gear on my back and you're on 2 feet. I feel like you learn to self-accept who you are, where you stand. And I feel like you start to see triggers too of like why things are the way that they are. Because when you eliminate all those distractions in society, like you just said, when you're out there, you disconnect. Even if you wanted to be on your phone or scrolling, you can't. There's like when there's no service and the wood says it's time out, like there's nothing you can do about it. And I feel like when you have that time of just pure clarity with just you and nature, there's no distractions and there's no one else to blame it on. It's like you have to take full responsibility. And then when you start actually deep diving into how things played out in your life, or the triggers, or what caused this and that, and you start actually taking responsibility for your role and you're thinking, and you start realizing these are my thoughts and this is where I'm going, and this is connected because of like childhood trauma, or this is because I was suffering here. It's just really interesting to see how it all ties back. And it's like we're all here for a reason. Everything is connected so we can get to the next chapter in our book. We have to go through seasons to learn of who we are and how we accept things in life. And this is where I'm completely going off track now.
Well, you said something interesting there that I resonate with, is like when you're out there, or we've done like truck camping trips before where we would drive around the United States in our truck and live out of what's in there. And you know, you are responsible for everything. You cannot blame anybody else, as you just said. If you are unprepared, if you don't have the right stuff packed, that's your own fault. And you know, you have to figure out what to do. You know, we can stock up on the next town, or we can make it through this night and until we can fix whatever our problem is. And
I feel like
then
it also shows you that your problems really aren't that serious as we kind of portray them to be in society. I notice a lot of times, like, my mental health will trigger, but the problems aren't really that bad when you take it down to just the basics of water and food and survival. It's like the priorities are completely different. It's kind of like you learn to let things be too.
yeah, and I bet you had a lot of like anxiety decompression out there because you don't have anybody else to get upset with or to point fingers at. I mean, I have two young kids. We have two girls under 3 right now, and man, just they can trigger me all the time. They are adorable. They're amazing, but yeah, if they don't listen, it's just like so triggering. And then you take that to adults, you know, family members and whatnot, and it's hard to do. Yeah, so you finished the Appalachian Trail, and like, I guess, when did you decide that you were going to just continue hiking? Like, I assume you set aside a bunch of money to get through these 6 months and do the initial Appalachian Trail. Did you just have enough left over that you could continue doing this, or?
This is actually a really good question. So 2021, April of 2021, I found an online business and community that I started to work with. Started working with some high commission water ionizer machines. So this training platform that I work with actually teaches how to run it on automation. So it's able to kind of run 24/7. So I did save up until the ATS, like sold my car. I sold most of like everything I owned. And I had saved up for a few months, but I mean, it kind of wasn't my plan to do the AT. I kind of thought maybe one day, but I never put a time frame on it. I didn't actually start saying, hey, I'm going to do the AT until my dog passed away. And that was Thanksgiving. I was always scared to say a date because I didn't want to like manifest something happening to him. I was like, oh, maybe one day something ever happened to him. But anyway, so here we are. So a few months I just worked. I was also, I quit the 9 to 5, but I was still also bartending at the time. So I was bartending, I was running my online business, and I was just selling everything that wasn't related to hiking in my car. And then while I was hiking through the process, the business kept escalating too. So I didn't really, the plan wasn't to continue hiking, but 2 days before I got to Katahdin, I was like, no, we're going to continue on. And I was like, I'm just going to find a way to make this work with the lifestyle. Um, and it is kind of a minimum lifestyle. You do have a lot of, resupplies and stops in towns, but it really comes up to what we would spend in society, everyday life too, if you really think about it, how much we spend on gas to get from A to B or commute, or, I was spending approximately the same. And with the business, I eventually got to the point where I could outsource. So I started having virtual assistants that was doing a lot of my sales calls for me and doing a lot of my background work. And at the time, I was also running paid ads. So traffic was coming to my account. So whenever I had service or got into town, I was like, let's make these sales, let's educate people, let's filter people in. And then my team just kind of started doing their own thing. So it became sustainable enough that I could extend my journey for a little bit longer.
That's really cool. So you were doing that even before you started doing the trail. But that became your full-time gig once you started hiking.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I know that when I know that some people when they do these through hikes, they stop through town and actually crash in hotels and whatnot. Uh, are you doing that? Or are you primarily staying on trail when you're walking?
That's a good question. It just depends. For the most part, I am staying on trail, but I do stay into town when I have those town stops. So maybe on the AT, maybe every 4 to 5 days, I would sometimes stay in a hotel or I would get food in town. And along the AT, it was a lot more popular trail. So they also had these places like called hostels where people would have like bunks to sleep in and have like a community kitchen and stuff. So I took advantage of a lot of hostels going up to. You pay like 15, $20 a night and get a hot meal, shower, food. They'll sometimes take you back and forth through the trailhead and then you can just pick up right where you got off trail.
Hmm.
And a lot of those places too will also hold resupply boxes. So if you were able to mail yourself stuff ahead too.
Oh, that's cool. And I assume those are all like public addresses and everything. So when you know you're coming up on this spot, you can go ahead and order something, order new shoes or whatever you need, so that by the time you get there, it's all ready for you.
Yeah, it's actually pretty fancy how technology's come into play. I can't even imagine, honestly, how they used to backpack back in the day. Feel like that's another thing the trail shows you is just so much gratitude for just the small things and involvement with life too. Because even though it's good to disconnect, when you also get into town, it's good to also have that phone call and connect with loved ones. And you're like, okay, this is good. And then you get a fancy map that shows you all your water stops and how long until your next town and the hotels that's there and the hostels that's there. So it's kind of good to know what's coming up and make it very easy where you don't have to carry like a big book or have lots of paper maps or anything like that this day and time.
That's great. Yeah, you did all of these as a solo hiker too. So I know that some people they will go with a significant other or friends and whatnot. And um, can you maybe tell us how that experience was for you going solely by yourself versus having a support system to lean on?
This is a really good question because on the AT, even though I started solo, I made the decision to do it solo by myself. It's such a high trafficked trail that I felt like you met a lot of hikers. So I didn't really feel that alone on the trail. And then when I was like with those other hikers, I feel like it kind of tests you on teamwork and communication and conversation. And um, it really challenges you on a new level, which I feel like is important. But then also there comes a time, like on the CDT, I hiked almost 1,700 miles and I didn't see anyone on trail. Seen a few day hikers in the national parks, but it was so much solitude that I have ever experienced before in my life. And I feel like that made it so different because on the AT, I learned a lot of that teamwork and team player, but then also on being completely solo, it's you against you. There's no one, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, the whole blame game or distractions. It's like you have to hold yourself accountable. Like you don't have anyone there to push you to do those 25 miles to make sure you don't run out of food or get out of town. Or if you run out of food, someone has your back, or you run out of water, someone's got you. It's like a completely different mentality of like completely by yourself. I almost feel like when I'm with someone else, it's almost that oh, well, if something happens, there's someone around. Like someone kind of knows where I'm at, or someone can find me or something, like be okay. But then when you're completely by yourself, it's like, okay, like we got to take a little bit more precaution. It's not as you got to really take care of yourself. And, but, I almost feel like too, when you're solo by yourself, like it's a lot more of inner healing and deep dive into. And you kind of deal with your loneliness and where your mind goes. Cause at one point, like you could only talk to so many chipmunks when I was up there. I was like, this is crazy. I need someone to talk to. And you start valuing like human connection a lot more when you don't have it. So they're both very different, but I think it just depends what you're looking for in life. I think through hiking as a couple is kind of very powerful too, because if you can make a through hike as a together as a whole couple, I feel like you could tackle anything in life because you are working through so many obstacles together. Um, but I think If you were to like, hey, do I want to do this with my partner, do it solo, it really just depends what you're looking for.
That's interesting. Why was the Appalachian Trail so much more high traffic than the Continental Divide Trail?
That's a good question. I think a lot of it is because the Continental Divide Trail is so remote. Um, it's a lot longer to get to trailheads. It's not as accessible. Sometimes to get to trailheads would be uh, 40 minutes down a long dirt road, or maybe it would be down a crazy ATV four-wheeler road where a vehicle can't get down. The AT, you had some of those moments, but for the most part, there's a lot of access points to get on and off the AT, which makes it safer to hike because if something was to happen to you, there's more areas to get off if you needed to, or to get back on, or if you got in a bad storm, you could easily get off, find your way off, get back on. I feel like it's been so knowledgeable for so many years that they've connected so many trails to the AT as well. So it's like you may be on a through hike, but you may could take the little day hike section and then be to another parking lot or whatnot. So, your 40 miles may have just turned into two really easy if you sprain an ankle or ran out of food or got caught in some weather or something like that. And then the CDT, I just feel like it's so remote. And then I feel like on the East Coast, you have, because it's so knowledgeable, you have a lot of like trail angels, people that are providing, they're there like waiting to pick you up or cook you a hot dog, take you into town or tell you about the Lord or tell you about what's going on that day. It's just like so many people know about it. The CDT, I got amazing trail magic that was more personable. Like people offered me their home to like stay the night in or something. But a lot of that was like a one-off occasion where we sparked a conversation or I'd met someone. It's not like they were in the parking lot waiting to give trail magic. So I feel like it was just so different.
Let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsors.
Here on the High Quality Fun podcast, we love showcasing people's stories through our interviews and posts. This gives our guests the opportunity to share their favorite memories, but sometimes audio alone is not enough. Most people are sitting on a collection of hundreds of photos and videos capturing their favorite moments without the time or experience needed to compile these memories into a video. This is why I have chosen to partner with Spivo. Simply send them your unsorted photos and videos, and in 7 days or less, they will create a professional video edit that allows you to relive your favorite memories again and again. To ensure every customer is satisfied with their video edit, Spivo provides unlimited revisions for 30 days and offers a 100% money-back satisfaction guarantee. As someone who has limited time to edit his family adventures, let alone this podcast, I am excited to work with Spivo to help everyone eternalize their favorite moments. Visit spivo.com/discount/high-quality-fun to learn more and let us know what you think about the product. We'd love to share it.
Now, back to the show.
I know the Appalachian Trail is kind of the go-to when people decide to do these big hikes, and I think that's primarily because it's so approachable. But I still would imagine that you would have seen more people or seen a lot of people to hike along with on the CDT.
Yeah. I think because I was a little bit late in season and I went southbound versus northbound, that also makes it a little bit more isolated. So that could be one of the reasons I didn't see as many. But I think that's another reason why so many people start on the Appalachian Trail. Because, like for my case, I'd only had one backpacking experience, but there were so many people on the AT that you could find that would be like willing to help you. So it's not like you had to be super knowledgeable to get through it, if that makes sense, as long as you're willing to learn. There's people there that would have your back. I think it goes back to the ATs more of a community. I remember one of the first things I sent back was my bear can because that thing is so heavy, but I didn't know how to hang a food bag. And I was nervous about going on trails. Like, I got to take a bear can because I don't know how to hang my food bag. Then after a while, I was like, this beer can is so heavy. Like, it's an extra 2.5 pounds. Like, I'm ditching this thing. And I went into town and I was telling people I didn't know how to hang a food bag. And they're like, oh, get it anyways. You'll find someone on trail that can help you. And literally the next night I was at a shelter. I'm like, can someone help me hang my food bag? And there's like 4 people that's like, yeah, I can help you. Now, if I was on the CDT, that wouldn't have happened. But on the AT, it's just, I think, more approachable because you just, especially if you start in the bubble where there's so many hikers, you just have a big community of people that are like willing to help you for the most part, my experience.
Did so they yeah, for people who don't know let me know if I'm explaining this wrong, but the bubble is everyone seems to start at the same time. There's actually like a season of when you're supposed to start doing each of these trails, and it's just so that you have the best weather. Weather's working with you, not against you. So I would assume that there's a bubble for every single trail, like the recommended time that you're supposed to be hiking this. Um, and I think that also you have to get like a permit to actually do these hikes, right? And that's just so that people can kind of help keep track of you, make sure you're not in super danger.
Perfect description of the bubble. Some parts require a permit and some does not. So like when I first started on the AT, I did register at Amacola, but then I did not register or have to do another permit until like the Smoky Mountains. And then I did another permit in like Shenandoah in Virginia. Then I did another permit up in Baxter in Maine. So it was maybe four. I think I did four.
It's almost like check-ins, just so they can well, she's somewhere in this length.
Yeah, I think to also just keep track of what's coming through and how many people too.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, good to know. You kind of started, in talking about traveling solo versus with groups, you kind of led on to this trail community. Can you maybe go into the community that you've built around this and how they've helped you through so much?
Yeah, so this is actually really interesting. I'm going to kind of bounce it off two parts here. But when I found my online business in 2021, I feel like that's my first time where I was running across a lot of free-spirited entrepreneurs that can just kind of see life a little bit different, that kind of push you towards like goals and life experiences. And I feel like chatting with them and having that experience of learning how to start an online business and whatnot really gave me the courage to branch out and go hike. Because when I was going through that huge season of life, I didn't have much to depend on. And I feel like just having someone that, or a group of people that just really encourage you, like, hey, like it's okay to live a different lifestyle. Like you can go and live in a tent in 6 months. It's totally normal. Like you can make this your normal, like go for it. So I feel like having that extra push. But even though I had that extra push, I still wasn't too involved in that community. I had a lot of resistance towards people, honestly. And that's something I kind of realized when I was hiking. Because on the AT, I started meeting these awesome people. And I'm like, oh my God, like you're so awesome. But then now you're going to hike away and I may not ever see you again. I don't even know your real name. And it's just, you kind of learn that people come into your life for a season or for a reason. You start learning like humans are good, and I just feel like the AT kind of restored my faith in human connection and restored my faith in humanity, honestly, because you see on the news and everything going so bad, but then you get out there and you see all this good. You just see how everything revolves and how everything's connected. You may be having the worst day off possible, and then you get to the parking lot and there's a hot dog, and then your shoelace may break, and then someone else may have an extra one that's like right there to give to you, and it's like everyone's giving with like nothing expected to be returned. It kind of reminded me of like the old days of living. And so it's like, wow, this is my people, this is it. So since I have been off trail now, because I've been in the hiker community and world now for 20 months, a lot of these hikers, you meet with them, you may or may not stay connected with them. The seasons may run its course. But now I have developed where I am branching out and growing my team around those same free-spirited, open-minded. We can create this if we really put our mind to it, and it's okay to live an abnormal lifestyle or that's different than society. Like we want to have that freedom base to go live in a tent for months at a time, go through hike, or spend time with your kids or family. You don't want to be confined or stuck. So now, since I am building my community in my online world with those same people that like I have met and just the same mentality, I feel like it's really up leveled and really made things a lot better, because a lot of times when you finish a through hike, you feel very like alone, like there's no one else that kind of knows what you went through or experienced that. But when you are surrounded by people that have, and that community that actually truly understands, they keep you on track. It's like, hey, they keep you accountable too. It's like, hey, you said you're going to do this, let's push you to do this and this. And yeah, I'm not sure if I went anywhere with that, but
No, I mean, you definitely shared like the non-traditional lifestyle when talking about your business community. And I mean, I think that's great. There's been a lot of guests that I've had on where they're doing something that's a lot of out of the norm, and yeah, they have to like convince themselves that it's, not asinine to go do this stuff. There are other people out there. And I know that technology makes that a lot easier. You were mentioning before the call that you've even like dove into the hiker community. I mean, I found you on social media because you have a decent like following base, and it sounds like you probably built that out over the past few years. Has there been times when that community of these complete strangers that just seem to follow your lifestyle have helped out?
oh, totally. This is really good. I needed a ride in Colorado actually. So I had posted on Instagram of some hiker friends, and come to find out she was actually in the same business community that I was in, also hiked, also lived in the area, and was also following my journey on social media and was able to shuttle me and help me resupply. So I thought that was crazy. I was like, I have no other options. What am I going to do? And I was like, because normally I'm very skeptical in sharing my real life location at the moment, but I was like, I don't really know what else to do. Like, let's just see if there's anyone out there willing to help. And it was like immediate response. And then there was other people that's like, hey, I'm not there, but I know someone. I could help them find them. I've been following your journey. Feel like I'm hiking with you. And I'm like, I have no idea who you are, but thank you. Like, come
I love
together.
that. It's I don't know if we were talking about this before call or not, but when you find that community that is around a hobby you like, you should be skeptical, right? You are a girl out in the woods solo hiking, there's a lot of creeps out there, but if you can validate that this person actually is into the same hobby as you, there's almost like an immediate connection and an immediate trust that you can go off of. So you probably put yourself in a little bit of risk by trusting some of these strangers, but just the fact that they are similar minded and you know doing the same hobbies, I'm sure you felt pretty much at ease, like hopping in car with somebody that when you had other options.
Oh, totally. And that comes back to when you take it a little bit off the online world. I mean, just the same as trusting people as hitchhiking. Here so many times it's like, oh my gosh, you're a single female, like hitchhiking, like sticking your thumb out to just get in a car with someone you have no idea. And it's like, yeah. And honestly, I've had the best conversations. I've met the best people. And usually we talk about something that I needed in my life to hear at that time, which normally you kind of don't think or realize that at the time. But then it also shows you how everything is connected in life. Like I remember one time I got a ride when I didn't think I was going to get one. And then when you see those brake lights and you see the car back up and you're just like, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then it's like you get in the car and then they may have a conversation that's a life lesson or something that they wanted to experience. And then they'll tell you the reason they stopped is because you're living their dream that they never got to live, or they had a so-and-so a friend that did it a long time ago, or they may have branched out and hiked a little bit in their younger days, or returning the favor. It's like just hearing these beautiful stories from people and getting to learn about these people and like what they've been through and why they pick up a crazy hitchhiker when they don't even know who they're picking up. And it's just real interesting because it's like everyone expects bad things to happen. And I know everyone has their story and I can't speak for everyone, but I know for me personally, those have been the best moments of my journey. So.
I like that. Is there any other community things that you wanna pull on before we move to my next question?
I think I'm good if you are. Let's roll.
Okay. Yeah. So what's next now? When did you finish the CDT, and what are we doing from here?
Oh, good question. So I finished the CDT this past December of 2023. What's now? April of 2024. The past 4 months have been pretty wild. I've spent some time in Alabama, spent some time in Texas, and I've actually moved to Virginia. So we're kind of in that in between seasons right now. I'm actually spending a lot of time outside. I've actually got back into the gym, which feels really good to move my upper body and other things besides my legs a little bit. But we're actually training right now. I'm planning on doing the Pinhoti again at the end of 2024. And I do have plans to complete the PCT here in a few years, which is the Pacific Crest Trail. Goes from the California to Oregon on that side. And I did purchase a old school news van that my plans right now is to currently convert it and just kind of turn it into a low-key camper van and just take it around the local spots here in Virginia, mainly as a conversion and a little project here to keep me busy. But we'll see where that goes. I'm kind of in a hump right now because the van is in Alabama and I'm not sure if I trust to drive it up to Virginia. But we're still kind of working.
I lost you for a second, but I heard you say you bought a news van and you need to figure out how to get it to you, and you don't know what you're doing with that. What else did I miss? Because you were cutting out for like 10 seconds there.
Oh, no. Okay. That's pretty much the gist of it. We're kind of unsure what we're going to do with it, but the plan is to kind of convert it and just use it as a local camper van just around here in the area until kind of figure out the long term with it. But yeah, we'll see how that plan goes. Right now, the van is currently in Alabama, and I'm just trying to decide if it's worth getting it shipped and then worked on mechanical issues here or work on some mechanical down there. So we're just kind of in the in-between pieces of it.
It's funny that you mentioned the van. I actually have a book over there from the library of just camper vans. We did truck camping, had this big ass tent that we toted around, and now that we have 2 kids, we bought a pop-up camper.
Nice.
So that we can kind of tote them around and introduce them to camping. But I've always had a dream of buying a van, gutting it, building it out, or a school bus or something. So that's really cool. I hope you actually continue and do that, because then I can come back to you and poke and prod you about how that experience went.
I love it. This is going to be something else that's brand new. A lot of YouTube videos. And it's so old school. It's definitely not my dream van, but I do think it's going to be a great starter van. And I'm not as scared to kind of dig in and watch YouTube and scared to mess something up since it's old school. But I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be a learning curve.
That's awesome. There's a website. I can send you the link afterward. It's called Far Out Ride. I don't know if you've stumbled on them yet, but it's like an engineer guy and girl, and they go into insane detail about how they do like plumbing, electrical, HVAC, everything in this van. And I have an engineering background, so it's just like a nerdy thing for me to dive into.
Love that.
Yeah, that's cool. What was I gonna say? Yeah, so you're doing the PCT coming up. That'll add how many additional miles to your current count?
Ooh, so if I'm not mistaken, I think the PCT's 2,800.
Oh my gosh.
So that will be my next long distance ones. Now, the end of this year, I'll be doing the Pinhoti Trail again. That one's 350 miles. And I do have plans to do the Foothills Trail in North and South Carolina, but that one's only like 72 miles. It's small.
As somebody who has not done a like overnight hiking, that seems like a lot.
I guess small depends on your range of what small is, but
no, in comparison to everything else, that's wild. Yeah, I guess at this point, I always try to pester my guests to just tell some of their favorite stories. Like now we have a great vision of who Brittany is and like everything that's going on in her life, sane or insane, I don't know. But you have to have some good stories from these miles that you've put on the trails. And by good, I mean they can be, happy stories, or are there particular ones that come to mind that may have sucked at the time, maybe you almost quit because of it, but they're probably tales that you tell your friends when you talk about these. So is there anything that comes to mind that chopping up a little bit?
Oh yeah, there's definitely a few that comes to mind. The one that I'll roll with is one that makes me very grateful to be here today. But out on the CDT, it's a very different trail than on the east side. It's more open, exposed, and remote. The weather's more unpredictable. And around Labor Day weekend, there was an unexpected storm that came through. So had a few days of messy weather, but this particular day, the weather shifted like 20 degrees within a 2,000-foot elevation within like 20 minutes. Like it was kind of insane. And it caused me to immediately like rush up and put up my tent in a panic situation. So my tent wasn't the best pitch. It was kind of slanted on some grass. And because of that, my tent totally got flooded out. So everything in my tent is wet. When I was putting my tent up, I also noticed like I was experiencing levels of hypothermia. It was like really shaky. My heart was racing. So I knew that I was kind of in some trouble. So once I got in my tent and situated, I just kind of told myself that I just got to stay awake. I was like, everything I've heard about hypothermia, you just have to stay awake. Like you just don't go to sleep. And what's really crazy is at the time, like you were very sleepy too when that happens. Like it's a very overcome, like your body really wants to go to sleep. So you really have to fight it. But that was a scary day because I just kept telling myself I just had to survive through the night. And there came a time like my tent was flooding out. I was actually scooping up water in my tent and boiling it and trying to make like hot chocolate and hot water. Because at the time I didn't have any water, like actually that I was able to drink. So so everything was kind of a mess. Sorry, I feel like I had to kind of like gather myself a little bit with the direction I want to go here with this. But yeah,
No
so I
worries.
just told myself I needed to just make it through the night. At one point, there was thoughts that I was not going to make it through the night, and I actually recorded myself and made a video to my family about explaining what happened because I didn't want anyone to blame themselves because they're all the time telling me not to be out there. Come on, just quit. Like what you're doing is insane, and I just didn't want
Jesus.
anyone to feel like responsible or anything. So I didn't send it, but I recorded it on my phone. And then I had my Garmin at the time, which is a satellite phone. It's an emergency phone that I carried, and I actually used it and messaged a few of my close people. One of them was a person that lived here in Virginia that was really close to me. I'm like, hey, I got caught in some really bad weather. I don't think I'm going to make it out of this. I just want to let you know, like, still thinking about you, love you kind of thing. And they called search and rescue, but the weather was too bad that search and rescue couldn't come out and they would have to like wait another 24 hours. So that was kind of in the air. And then I sent another message to a friend that was in the area and I gave them the mile marker of where I was at on trail because I was like, I don't want to just sit here weeks, a body in my tent. I'm like, I really don't think I want to make it out of this. I need to know like someone can able to find my body and actually take me back to my family or whatnot. So I'd sent that friend a message of my mile marker and they kind of like talked me through some things. And I think staying awake, being able to kind of text on the Garmin a little bit kind of kept me an effort to stay awake. I was experiencing coldness to another level. At one point, I'd actually was peeing in a Ziploc bag and was using that warmth between my legs. There's like a nerve that goes between your legs up to your heart and was like trying to keep that warm and whatnot. So I knew when it came down to this point, like, we got to make it through the night. I was like, tomorrow morning's going to come. There's going to be sunshine. We're just going to act like this never happened. We're going to be able to get off the mountain, easy peasy sailing. Fast forward to the next morning, there was no sunshine. Nothing
Oh
got
my
dried
God.
out. I waited around for like 2 hours. I tried to wring everything out the best I could. Everything was completely soaking wet. I still had 40 something miles to the next town, but I knew with the weather, like it was going to go back down later on that day. And I was like, there's no way. Like last night was scary, but now is going to be really bad because if I do not get off this mountain today, I'm going to die. And I started like trying to do some research and comments, but I hadn't had service for days, so only so much of that will load. But I had seen some comments that 12 miles up, you could take a junction, and it kind of connected to a popular day hike that led to a parking lot that was kind of really far from town, but sometimes there'd be vehicles in that parking lot where people that was just coming up and doing like one-nighters and coming back down. So I was like, that's my shot. I was like, but I obviously have to get there before dark, because when dark happens and I stop moving, I'm going to freeze to death because everything's wet. And no one picks up a hitchhiker at night. Like, you really want to do that during the day, because
And
you
you
don't want to
probably
get.
haven't slept at all. Yeah.
And I hadn't slept at all. So when I realized this, I made this decision. I was like, let's go. So I literally threw everything in and off we went. I didn't drink anything. I did not eat anything. I went through probably 4 water crossings that was like knee deep of just like frozen water. So it was like everything literally was wet. It was so open and exposed. So the wind was kind of like blowing. It felt really brutal. But I just told myself I have to get to that parking lot before dark. So I just kept hustling. And then somehow, right when I made it to the parking lot, it was right at sunset. It was just like almost too dark. And this truck is starting to pull out. And they're like, "You need a ride to Pinedale?" I'm like, "Yes. Can you please take me to Pinedale?" So we went into town. I got some food. I could tell that I'm like, adrenaline's going, brain fog's going. I'm not even sure what's going on. I don't even realize that I'm actually like sick at this point. I'm just kind of trying to roll through life. I ended up getting a hotel room. I didn't sleep a wink that night either. I thought I was going to go to the hotel room, and I thought I'd be so tired. The moment I hit that bed, I'd be done. I was like, I'm going to take tomorrow off, and we're just going to relax and rest and get lots of sleep. Then I woke up the next morning. I was like, that's kind of aggravating, because I didn't even sleep at all. I have a bed here and I didn't even sleep. Like, what's going on? So then the next morning I went down, I got food, and I started noticing a lot of brain fog. I was confused. Went to the dollar store to get like some Gatorades and some Pedialyte, and got lost in which direction my hotel room was. Like, there were some odd things. I'd misplaced my key, or not my keys, but my phone and my hotel room card. It was just a lot of weird things that I normally don't do, and a lot of things that you don't need to do when you're by yourself, honestly. Um, and I had actually made a story, because I had documented my journey through social media during this time. So I had made a story on my Instagram, and a nurse had reached out to me and was like, "Hey, don't mean to pry, but I think you need to go get checked out before you go back." And I'm like, "I think I'll be fine. I'm just going to go back to trail tomorrow." And then she was like, "You really need to go get looked at." And I started doing some research about, if you have like altitude sickness and you go back out too quickly, it can increase your risk of like a heart attack, and it could kill you. And I was like, okay, maybe I should just go get looked at and checked out and just make sure that I'm okay. Went to the emergency room. This sweet elderly couple was out in the parking lot, and I'm like, "Hey, can you take me to the emergency room?" They're like, "Sure, jump right in." So I went to the clinic, and they immediately threw like a heated blanket on me. They said I was still experiencing hypothermic symptoms. Keep in mind, this is like 2 days later. Still experiencing symptoms. They said I was completely dehydrated. So they gave me an IV and like hooked me up. And then the doctor kind of just explained to me that they had to airlift another hiker out of there that didn't make it. And he was like, "The crazy things you did on the mountain is what saved your life, and you're here for a reason." So I just felt like it was this huge gratitude, a moment to just show how everything is connected in life. Because if I wouldn't have made that story, the nurse wouldn't have told me to go to the clinic. And it comes to find out, I ended up having to take another 7 days off. And then my body went through this whole like survival mode. The doctor explained it. I just overexerted myself so much to the point of survival that for like a week I couldn't really like sleep very well. I was kind of experiencing some PTSD. When I'd fall asleep, I'd like wake back up. And I think a lot of that had to do with just keeping myself awake for so long. But yeah, we made it through that and we survived. And now we can look back and, got through my worst little experience on trail. But people were amazing in Pinedale, so that's another thing. People really look out. Everything plays out like it's supposed to. Those people that took me to town, like, literally saved my life. I don't even know if they know that. And, the little elderly couple that took me to the clinic, it's like things all fall into place when they need to. It's crazy.
Wow. Shout out to Pinedale. Yeah, you said that the guy didn't that they helicoptered off didn't make it.
No. So at that particular time, when I was in the clinic, they had taken one body off the mountain.
Holy shit.
They were still searching for a second body. And at that point, there was actually a third body that hadn't been reported missing, but they didn't know that at the time. So there was
That's
3 people.
That's messed up. I am very, very grateful that you made it through that. That's a wild story. Damn. Too much high quality fun right there.
Oh yeah, that weather can be predicting. But then if you want to shift it around, I did hike in the mud and the swamps in Florida and hiked with alligators for the first time. So
I don't think I like that. I don't know. I'm from Michigan, and so we're used to woods and everything. Like bear, that's all fine. None of that scares me. But you get me around an alligator, I have no idea what to do.
they're like a different breed. They're kind of fast. I wasn't expecting them to be as fast as they are, but they're definitely fast.
The fact that you know that they're fast is makes me think you've seen a couple charge or something.
They run.
Yeah, that's scary. I assume that was during your Florida trail hike.
The one now?
That was during your Florida trail
Oh.
hike.
Yeah, that's the only time I've seen alligators was in Florida. When I got close to Key West, I seen some, I think they call them saltwater crocodiles. I've seen a few of those, but yeah, mainly just alligators down there around the swampy areas.
Man, that's fun. Yeah, I feel like we've kind of gone through everything that I wanted to cover. I mean, we even went into some of the stuff that you're doing next. Do you think you're continuing to hike? Is it just for the love of it? Is it, I think it's fascinating that you are continuing to do this. Is there like a goal in mind that you're trying to knock out so many different trails at this point?
What started as a hike on the Appalachian Trail, I feel like I was so focused on that mountain of like Mount Katahdin because that's like the end of the AT. That's the end of the through hike. But one thing I have noticed, the through hike may end, but the hiking never does. The mountains never stop. The valleys continue to take you up. So I feel like the trail and the hiking world is always going to be there, but it's something, I may not long distance hike as much, but it is something that has my heart and my soul, and I know how I feel when I'm out there. And we talked about this briefly too. I feel like the hiking brings so much life reflections to you that it just peels you back layer by layer until you start to really learn and define yourself. But I feel like when we really dive into self-healing and growth, that never stops, right? Like we never stop learning. We never stop evolving. We continue to grow. So, the through hikes may end, it may come to a spot, but I feel like the hiking never stops.
I'll say this too, like right now you're kind of in between hikes. Are you finding that you're just like antsy for the next one, or are you actually enjoying the time back home or, catching up with everybody in between the two hikes?
This is a really good question. I kind of want to touch base on both of these because when I finished the 8,500 miles, this end of my hike was a lot different than when I finished like the 4,400. Like when you take me back to Florida and I finished the 4,400 miles in 11 months, I didn't know what my next hiking was going to be. And I was so antsy and so depressed. I was like, man, I just reached this big goal and then it just slapped me in the face. Like, what am I going to do? And that was one of the reasons I went and I yo-yoed the Pinhoti because it was just enough length to kind of just save up time because I was like, maybe I could go do the CDT, but I don't know if I'm ready for that because I just did this really long one. So maybe I'll just go and play around on trail. I ended up yo-yoing the Pinhoti doing like 700 something miles. I ended up going over to Bankhead Forest in Alabama. I ended up road tripping with a friend out to like Arizona. We ended up doing some hikes and stuff. But no matter what, I was so antsy. I was like, this is not me. I need to be like living in my tent. Even at my grandmother's, I put up my tent outside. I was really having a hard time like juggling. My family was like really worried for me. They're like, you need to like do something. Like you're not handling this post trail very well. So then I was like, okay, I just need to go back on trail. We're just going to go perfect timing for Sobo for the CDT. Let's just jump right back in. So I really didn't do as much research on that trail either. And I was kind of expecting the CDT to be like the AT, But then when I got out there, and it's like you realize the weather's so different, it was definitely challenging. It was more mentally challenging. The food carries were longer. The water was more interesting. I was drinking out of cow truffles and mud puddles, and there was like cow poo in my water. Totally different than the East Coast. That when I actually finished this last time, it's not like I had reached burnout, but I was just very grateful to not be cold, to have a roof over my head, to be able to flush the toilet. Like, I don't really care not to sleep in the tent for a little bit. I've enjoyed the comfort of a bed. I've enjoyed the company with the dogs and my people. But I feel like it's also different because at that time when I finished the 4,400 miles, I was so lost. I didn't have a plan when I got off the trail. And even though the CDT, I still didn't have a plan, but I knew I was going to kind of lean towards the van world. I started kind of coming up with daily methods of operation that's going to kind of keep my mind moving and my body moving. So like I got back into the gym. I started going to community classes that kind of got me out to talk to people, kind of move my body in a different way. I started trail running. I have never trail run before my hiking, so I've now tried to like do things a little bit different. Like you can still mentally challenge yourself, get out there, do a trail run without having to, do another 8,500 miles. So at this point in my life, I just wanted to touch base on both because I feel like when you come off trail, it's a huge awakening moment because you realize all the things you learned on trail, and you realize like your life is never going to be the same because you're never going to look at life the same. Everything's so different now, but a lot of things are still the same when you come back to the real world. And sometimes that's like a iffy balance because you've changed so much that you expect everyone else to see what you've seen, but they don't. So I feel like having like that community and that plan of like knowing what I need to do to take care of my mental health is a lot better. I was able to learn from the previous time too.
There's a lot of things that you touched on there that I really liked. I know when people finish these crazy hikes, they almost feel lost because you just spent 6 months living off your back and come back to the real world. It's kind of hard to adjust back to that. And I mean, I started recently training for a marathon, something I've never done. I ran in high school, but that was, 15 years ago. And so the last time I actually like pushed myself, challenged myself for a time, for like a race time, was in track in high school. And so I'm finding that a lot of people, they finish these events and they're like searching for the next thing, and it's like a new chapter in their life. I left high school into college, and now many years later I'm training for this marathon. It feels really, really good, really empowering to be like challenging myself and pushing my body, beat down some bad habits I've picked up, and actually start working towards better health for myself. So yeah, I think that's great. And then you mentioned trail running. Are you just doing short runs? Are you getting into like the psycho ultra marathon trail runs that people are doing?
So when I finished Florida and I went and yo-yoed the Pinhoti, when I yo-yoed, so I walked north, and then when I walked south, I decided to do this crazy thing where I was going to attempt an FKT, which is a fastest known time, which would equivalent be like a marathon runner because I was having to average 50 miles a day. Keep in mind, I have never ran in my life. I just done this like long distance crazy hike. So my body was kind of already shot. And I yo-yoed it because Florida was so flat in elevation. I was like, let me just go walk the hills again and train my feet to get elevation. And if I'm feeling good and spunky, I'll just run it coming back with all my hiking stuff. And I did. My pace was just keep walking forever for 7 days because I hadn't trained appropriately for this marathon or runner. I'd never even ran a 5K or anything in that manner. So by the end of this crazy 7 days, I had went through hallucinations. I had went through every sort of sickness that you could imagine. I was pretty much dragging my body. And the last 8 miles, I had fell off a small waterfall. And it was like 2 o'clock in the morning and rain and fog. And I ended up just calling the deal off. But later on, I'd found out that if I would have kept pushing, I would have probably made it. But I also feel like that was we all have our seasons in life. I did go back and finish those 8 miles. So technically that through hike is complete, but I did not get the record or the FKT. So now I'm in a spot in my life where I don't know if it's an advantage or disadvantage doing something after a really long time, because 350 miles seems like nothing after 4,400. But now I'm taking these months and I'm just trying to really train my body at high intensity. I am running 5 to 6 miles when I can. Um, Sometimes I've been trying to take it up to 10, but I haven't really got over 10 yet. But I've been trying to run more to kind of pick up my pace more. So my thoughts are, when I do the Pinhoti again and I compete for that fastest known time, my pace will be a little bit better than it was last time, and I can finish it out. So I keep saying me and the Pinhoti has unfinished business to do. So that's kind of my goal and what I'm shooting for. So I don't know what category that falls in under.
You're definitely going to be doing ultras real soon. I can just see it. The brains turn in. You're going to get that fastest trail time, and then be doing some of these crazy races that exist out there. Oh man, Brittany, this was a ton of fun. Why don't you go ahead and give any shout outs that you want to, tell everyone about your pages so people can find you, and just wrap it up from there.
Sure. This was so fun to chat. I appreciate you taking your time to talk with me. Love it. Yeah, I want to give a shout out to my grandmother and my family for supporting me through all this crazy moments of my journey in life. They were with me through the entire time, through FaceTimes and phone calls. Even though they said I was crazy, I needed to quit, they also kept pushing me and encouraging me. And so that's just been great. Want to give a huge shout out to Harley. He's been with me since the beginning of my journey too, and through all this self-transformation, and been really encouraging and stood by me. My mentor, Natasha, because I would not have found thru-hiking if I didn't find my online business and community. So shout out to her. My girls that hold me accountable every week. My AB group, I met them in Texas in this past January, right when I finished the trail. And it's been seriously the best thing that could have happened for me, because when I do go in my little moments of life, they're there to be like, hey, look what you just did. If you can hike 8,500 miles, you can get through this day and you can do it. So you just get out of your little victim mentality and your little sugarcoat. You just keep moving forward. And it's just a reminder that life's moving forward. So huge shout out there. And yeah, if anyone wants to follow along, I have Instagram and YouTube. I've documented a lot of my journey, and I continue to document. It's at Hiking with Puddin, Puddin. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Thank you for listening to the High Quality Fun podcast. If you guys enjoyed this show, please give us a follow. And if you have a good story or just want to say hi, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram or YouTube. Thanks for listening.